Hello, everybody. So my name's Bethan. A huge part of my work involves exploring how biology explains the human body and sometimes how it also surprises us. So today's topic is one of my favorites because it sits right at the intersection of genetics, medicine, evolution, and also science fiction. So I'm going to start with a question. So if you could choose one superpower, what would it be? So hopefully you should now see a poll coming up on your screen. It might be in the chat. So feel free to take part. Your responses are completely anonymous. So would you choose super strength, perfect memory, the ability to never feel pain, or to survive on almost no sleep? Now, for most of human history, these ideas belong to mythology, comic books, and science fiction. But today, modern genetics and biomedical science are revealing something extraordinary. And that is that some humans really do possess the abilities that seem almost superhuman. Not because they were bitten by a radioactive spider, and not because they came from another planet, but because biology itself is variable. So let's have a look to see how you're getting. Oh, apologies, it didn't launch. It changed my screen. There we go. So apologies on that. And hopefully you should see my screen again. Nope. Apologies, technology. Perhaps I need the superpower to how to use the technology properly. But today we're going to have a journey through some of those examples of real life human superpowers and explore what they can teach us about medicine, evolution, and ethics, and ultimately what it means to be human. Now, humans, hopefully we can see all the results. Oh, most of you would like to see, oh, we've got equal results here. So we've got perfect memory, feeling no fear, and future tech enhancements. Okay. So humans have always been fascinated by the idea of transcending normal limitations. And across cultures and across centuries, we tell stories about heroes who can run faster, see further, survive impossible dangers, or gain powers beyond ordinary human ability. And those stories matter. So they reflect something deeply human, which is the desire to become more capable, more resilient, and also less vulnerable. Now, comic books, I should say, they exaggerate biology, but often they exaggerate things that biology already hints that are possible. And that's what makes this topic so interesting. And because modern genetics is showing us that extraordinary traits are not entirely fictional, sometimes evolution, mutation, or even rare biology pushes humans into extremes that we never expected. So I want you to keep one question in mind as we go through this talk. So again, it relates back to the question I posted in the chat. If you could safely enhance one aspect of human biology, what would you choose? But of course, we first of all need to define what actually is meant by a superpower. And I'm not talking about magic, and I'm definitely not talking about Marvel physics. So in biology, a superpower usually means a rare trait with a measurable effect that significantly changes human ability. And those traits can arise from genetics, development, a disease, or even extreme training. But there's always something important to remember, and that is most biological advantages come with a trade-off. So nature rarely gives something for free. So a mutation that increases one ability may damage another. So for example, a body that's optimized for one environment may struggle in another. And many of these traits are not entirely separate from normal biology. They are often exaggerations of processes all humans already possess, which means that the line between ordinary and extraordinary is sometimes surprisingly thin. So we're going to begin with something that sounds straight out of science fiction, and that is super strength. So inside the human body, we have a protein called myostatin. And the job of this protein is to act as a brake on muscle growth. Normally, this is useful. Without regulation, our muscles could grow uncontrollably. But in very rare cases, mutations reduce or disable this myostatin activity, and the results can be dramatic. So individuals with these mutations can develop unusually high muscle mass and exceptional strength. And we've also seen these in animals as well. So some cattle breeds, the example I have here, is a breed known as a double-muscled cattle. Now, what's fascinating is that scientists immediately recognized the medical implications of these mutations. If we can understand how this pathway works, then perhaps we could help patients with muscle wasting diseases, age-related frailty, or those with severe injuries. But of course, again, biology is complicated. So bone muscle is not automatically healthier. So extreme muscularity can create metabolic strain and other complications. And this will become a recurring theme throughout today's talk, which is every enhancement has a consequence. Now, imagine having bones so dense they resist fractures. Again, this is something that sounds really useful, and in some ways it is. So rare mutations in a gene called LRP5 can produce extremely high bone density. And individuals with these mutations can survive impacts that would normally cause fractures. Scientists became increasingly interested in this because osteoporosis affects millions of people worldwide. So studying these individuals may help us design better therapies. But again, there's some trade-offs. Too much bone growth can become dangerous. So bone, after all, is a living tissue. So we need to have a balance. If bones become excessively dense, then it can create problems with movement, with nerve compression, and overall health. So biology constantly teaches us that optimization is rarely simple. Now, this is, as some of you have answered on the question earlier on, is one of the universally desired superpowers. So, needing less sleep. So most of us know what sleep deprivation feels like. So the idea of functioning perfectly on 4 hours of sleep sounds amazing. And remarkably, some people really can do it. So a rare mutation linked to a gene called DEC2 is associated with natural short sleep. Now, these individuals don't just tolerate less sleep, they genuinely seem biologically adapted to it. So they remain functional, energetic, and cognitively normal despite sleeping for far less than average. So one thing I will say is that this is not a productivity hack that you might find on TikTok. So most humans cannot train themselves into this state. So for most people, chronic sleep deprivation will damage memory, will then have some effects on mood, immunity, metabolism, and of course, long-term health. The scientists study these rare individuals because sleep remains one of biology's greatest mysteries. So why do we need it? How does the brain repair itself? Why is consciousness so dependent on rest? And sometimes rare biology helps us to answer these universal questions. Now, I'm going to move into something both fascinating but also frightening, which is the inability to feel pain. Now, certain mutations affecting sodium channels in nerve cells can prevent pain signals from being transmitted properly. And this condition is called congenital insensitivity to pain, or shortened to CIP. At first glance, again, this is something that might sound incredible. So, no pain, no suffering, no physical agony. But pain exists for a reason. So pain protects us. People born without pain sensation can accidentally break bones. They can also burn themselves. They can damage their joints or develop life-threatening injuries without even realizing it. So pain is unpleasant because evolution designed it to keep us alive. And yet we're still interested in these mutations. Why is that? Well, because if we can understand how pain signaling works, perhaps we can develop safer painkillers, especially at a time where addiction to opioid medications remains a major global issue. So again, extreme biology may help medicine. Now imagine something even stranger, which is a person who experiences almost no fear. And before anybody asks, this is definitely not me. I have many fears, but there are rare neurological cases involving damage to a brain structure called the amygdala. So the amygdala plays a major role in processing fear. In some individuals, then severe damage of this area in the brain can dramatically reduce fear responses. So researchers have observed that those individuals might calmly approach a situation that most of us will instinctively avoid. But again, similar to pain, fear is actually incredibly useful. Without it, human evolution would probably have ended very quickly. So fear is survival. Fear keeps humans away from danger. Now, studying these rare cases has transformed our understanding of anxiety, post-traumatic stress or PTSD research, trauma, and also emotional decision making. So the brain is not designed simply to maximize courage. It is designed to maximize survival. And sometimes what we imagine as a superpower would actually make life much more dangerous. And not all superhuman traits are dramatic. Some are subtle. Some people possess unusually high sensitivity to bitter chemicals. And these individuals are often called super tasters. Others have remarkably refined senses of smell. And the differences arise partly from genetic variation in sensory receptors, and they can influence not only the diet, nutrition, food preferences, but as you can see down the bottom right-hand side of the screen there, can also influence career paths as well. So professional wine tasters and perfume experts often combine natural sensitivity with years of training. So some people experience flavor completely different from others. To a super taster, certain foods or even smells, since they can taste overwhelmingly bitter, which explains why some people generally hate things like Brussels sprouts or even black coffee. Yeah. So interesting fields here. So biology creates potential. Environment and practice can shape an outcome, but of course our genes are rarely a destiny. So genes can't tell us what career that we'll do in the future. Now, some genetic variations influence oxygen transport and energy efficiency. For example, what we have here is an EPOR-related pathway, and that affects red blood cell production. So we see these in elite athletes or elite endurance. But again, elite endurance is not controlled by a single sports gene. It involves hundreds of biological factors working together. So we have the oxygen transport, but we also got muscle fiber composition. Then we have metabolism, recovery, and also heat regulation. But we have populations living at high altitude, like the Tibetan communities, and these have a remarkable physiological adaptation to low oxygen environments. So these are just some extraordinary examples of human evolution occurring within our own, or I should say, evolution occurring within our own species. But athletic performance itself is never purely genetic. We have the genes, but we also have the training, the environment, and of course, opportunity. And unfortunately, there's still no confirmed gene for actually enjoying long distance running. But anyhow, this raises a difficult ethical question. If enhancement technologies become possible, where do we draw the line between therapy and enhancement? And at what point does medicine become engineering? Now, one of my favorite examples of human adaptation comes from the Bajau people of Southeast Asia. These communities have practiced free diving for generations. And researchers discovered that they tend to have universally enlarged spleens. Why does that matter? Well, the spleen acts as a reservoir of oxygen-rich blood cells. During the deep dives, those cells can then be released into circulation, helping the divers to remain underwater for longer. And this is one of the clearest examples of culture, environment, and biology shaping each other across generations. So this is an example of biology adapting to lifestyle and environment. And it also reminds us that evolution is not just ancient history. So human populations continue to adapt. And again, culture and biology are deeply interconnected. Now, some people possess an extremely rare condition called hyperthymesia. Again, if I look back on the question, 33% of you said that you would like to have perfect memory. Well, these individuals can recall autobiographical memories in astonishing detail. So they can remember dates, events, conversations, and moments from decades earlier. Again, that sounds extraordinary. And again, if we've got some students on the call today, then that might sound like something that all students would like to have as a superpower, especially as you're preparing for exams. But again, in the grand theme of things for today, there's a hidden cost to this superpower. So memory is not just about remembering. Forgetting is also essential. So imagine never being able to escape painful memories or embarrassing moments or grief or regret. Now, too much memory can become emotionally exhausting. And honestly, forgetting embarrassing moments is probably one of the brain's kindest features. So the brain involved not to perfectly record reality, but to help us function. Now, I'm going to step briefly into the edge of science fiction. So humans are weakly sensitive to electrical and magnetic phenomena. And it's not in the comic book sense, so no one is going to be shooting lightning bolts, but researchers are exploring brain stimulation, sensory augmentation, and new ways technology may extend perception. So could future humans perceive information in entirely new ways? Now, some experiments already allow people to interpret entirely new forms of sensory input using wearable systems and neural interfaces. But could wearable or implanted systems allow us to sense things evolution never prepared us for? So this is where biology and technology begin to merge, and then the future becomes harder to predict. So at this point, the obvious question becomes, could we intentionally engineer enhanced humans? So technologies like CRISPR gene editing are advancing rapidly. We also have brain-computer interfaces, and these are becoming increasingly sophisticated. We've got things like exoskeletons and wearable systems, and these already augment physical ability. And biomedical enhancement is no longer purely theoretical. But these possibilities raise enormous ethical questions. So who gets access? Who decides what counts as an enhancement? Could enhancement increase inequality? What happens if biology becomes something people can purchase? So the science itself is exciting, but ethics matter just as much as the technology. And of course, history teaches us to be cautious whenever human beings are talking about improvement. So this slide highlights some of the reasons why. So you can see examples of times when ideas about creating better humans went very wrong. So from eugenics and forced sterilization policies to unethical experimentation that was carried out without consent. But even today, we still see pressures around enhancement in areas like elite sports and performance culture. And that's why ethics matters just as much as the science itself. So the goal of science and medicine should never be to create perfect humans. The goal should be to reduce suffering, improve the quality of life, and make healthcare fairer and safer for everyone. Now, at this point, it is important to separate science fiction from real biology. So pop culture gives us dramatic transformations. So we've got gamma radiation creating superheroes, instant telekinesis, or a single serum unlocking a perfect human potential. But in reality, biology is far less cinematic. So radiation, for example, it doesn't create superheroes. It damages DNA. It causes burns. It also causes cancer and organ failure. So real human traits that we've seen today are usually much subtler than the versions we see in films. So extraordinary abilities, so memory extremes, endurance adaptations, pain resistance, they all still operate within the limits of physics and physiology and evolution. And while technologies like exoskeletons and brain-computer interfaces are real, they augment the human body rather than magically replacing its limitations overnight. But despite all of that, science fiction still matters enormously because imagination often inspires innovation. So you'll see some of the examples at the bottom of the screen here, and these are just reminders of that. So Star Trek communicators helped inspire mobile phones. Then we have things like fictional medical scanners, and those inspired real diagnostic technologies. And even the Iron Man style suit helped to drive interest in exoskeleton research. So fiction is not useless fantasy. It can act as a kind of a creative laboratory for scientific ideas. So the key thing is learning to separate evidence from hype. So stay curious and imaginative, but also still think critically about what is scientifically realistic, what is ethically ethical, and what is biologically possible. Perhaps the real value of superhero stories isn't that they predict the future perfectly, but that they encourage us to ask better questions about what humanity could eventually become. And behind all of these discoveries are scientists doing incredibly careful work. So this research depends on things like genetic sequencing, clinical case studies, population studies, and years of biomedical investigation. So most of these breakthroughs do not happen overnight. So science is usually slow, it is collaborative, and it is also methodological. And translating discoveries into therapies can take decades. But these discoveries, they matter because they help us to understand disease, resilience, adaptation, and also human potential. Just make sure you're still awake. I've changed the colour of the background of the slide. So I want to leave you with the thought experiment. So imagine you could safely enhance one aspect of human biology, and I mean safely. Would you choose strength, endurance, memory, or sensory perception? But also keep in mind the trade-offs. So strengths without balance, memory without forgetting, fearlessness without caution, painlessness without protection. Would that ability still feel desirable? And perhaps more importantly, what does that reveal about us as human beings? Because maybe our limitations are not simply flaws, maybe they're part of what keeps us alive. So science and medicine is increasingly blurring the lines between therapy and enhancement. The future may become more science fictional than we expect, but extraordinary humans already exist. Biology is full of variation, and ultimately science is not just teaching us how humans differ, it's teaching us what humans are. And perhaps the most fascinating superpower of all is simply how adaptable humans already are. So, apologies, that took me a few minutes shorter than I expected. But again, thank you for joining us, and I'll happy to take any questions.
Right, diolch yn fawr iawn, Bethan. Thank you very much, Bethan, for that great talk. I was thinking at the start of the talk when you asked about which superpower, I've always got one very clear one in mind. And for me, it's always been teleportation. I think that would be the one. I know that wasn't on your list. That's always first of all. But I think watching this, the memory one, I think a lot of people would say, and have said during this talk, in fact, that they see me with the memory side of things. And I can definitely see the pros and cons, like you were mentioning with the memory one, for definite. So if anybody's got any questions, we haven't had any come in during the session, but please just put them quickly in the Q&A. Or if you also want to share with us what superpowers you'd like, if they weren't on that list, then please do. One thing I was wondering, Bethan, so obviously you were talking a little bit about how science fiction and real life kind of blurs across each other and how there's been things developed from science fiction. What do you think might be on the verge, or the kind of areas that we might see that kind of overlap soon?
Oh,
so that's not an easy one to start with.
It's not. No, I mean, there's so many research going on in different avenues. I mean, we've come a long way from, well, I was talking to one of colleagues yesterday. Well, one of my colleagues was doing a talk on how even conflict shaped medicine as well, and that, you know, the evolution of plastic surgery, different types of you know, even sort of splints that we use, but we've also got the development of medicines like insulin. You've got the heart valves. I mean, it's endless what we've, you know, what's going to be the next thing.
That is, yeah, like you say, it's very fast moving, isn't it now? And we've actually got a question come in that I think is kind of a similar question again, saying thanks very much for the talk. which world-changing superpower do you see occurring in the near future based on current research? So again, kind of similar thing. Have you got any thoughts what you think might be?
I know that they're currently using the CRISPR technologies to develop try and edit genes in diseases to try and reduce the severity of disease and to try and enhance the treatment. So that might be the next thing that might come out. So perhaps it might feed into things like cancer therapy. But yeah.
I guess there's lots of different avenues, isn't there, that this can kind of go down. Great, thank you very much for that question. Again, anybody else with any questions, we've got time, please pop them in. Another thing I was thinking as we were going through the talk, because again, you touched on ethics, Bethan, and obviously that's quite a big part when technologies develop and things change. And I was thinking particularly with things like sport and what enhancements people might be able to make in the future and the ethics alongside that.
Yeah.
And you know, that's a big industry, isn't it, in terms of financial things. So I can see how it all kind of works together, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, we're seeing a lot more rules coming in with the Olympics, for example. Again, with I know when they go out to training, they go out to the Alps and the Tibet to try and increase the amount of oxygen that those blood cells can carry. Again, where are they going to draw the line? Are they going to then call that, well, stop them from competing because they got an advantage of other people who can't have the same opportunities to go there? Again, what else is going to be coming out around the corner?
I guess it's hard to keep up with all the changes, isn't it?
Yeah.
So many different avenues. So I don't think we've got any more questions coming in. But thank you very much again, everybody, for joining. Diolch yn fawr iawn pawb am ymuno efo ni heddiw. I'm definitely going to be thinking about which of the superpowers that I would like moving forward. Now I've had the list of pros and cons. I'm sure it'll be a discussion in our office tomorrow as well. So thank you very much for the question that we've had. We have another question coming in as I was about to wrap up. It's important. So like I said, you know, if you've got your questions coming in, guys, please do. So the next question we've got, Bethan, is could having multiple genetic variations together cancel out the negative effects?
Oh. I suppose, well, we've got a large amount of genes. It depends if the mutation happens in the same gene, which may cancel it out, but if it happens in another, you might end up with having more than one superpower.
And then we've got another question as well, going back to what we were talking about the ethics and the fairness, asking, could genetic engineering make existing inequalities worse?
I believe it could, in my opinion. Because again, who can access it? Who's going to pay for it? How do you decide who gets the enhancements, or if you want to call it enhancements, or medicine and that sort of thing?
So very clear opinion.
Yeah, it's yeah.
Right. Well, thank you for those two questions that we had coming in there. Really appreciate them. So yeah, we're going to wrap up now, everybody. So thank you very much, eto. Again, thank you very much, diolch yn fawr iawn am ymuno efo ni. We hope you enjoyed today's session. And if you are interested in any of the North Wales Medical School courses, please take a look at our web pages, or you can join us at an open day this summer. The next one is taking place on Saturday, the 4th of July, and you can book a place on our website if you want to come and have a look.